May 24, 1943. The slate-gray swells in North Atlantic heave and churn under a brooding, leaden sky heavy with the promise of squalls. The wind howling across the open sea at 35 knots and whipping stinging salt spray across the rain-slicked decks of Convoy ONS-5, a determined but ragged line of 42 merchant vessels plodding eastward toward the distant spires of Liverpool, their riveted hulls groaning and creaking against the relentless roll of waves that crest at 20 feet and crash down with thunderous force of far-off artillery barges. The air bites with a raw, penetrating chill that seeps through oilskins and woolen sweaters, carrying the pungent, briny reek of diesel exhaust from straining engines mingled with the faint, underlying metallic tang of fierce sweat from a multinational crews, British, Norwegian, American, and Greek seamen, huddled in cork-filled lifeboats or peering intently through salt-encrusted binoculars from fog bridge windows. In the dimly lit wheelhouse of the American Liberty ship SS John Harvey, a 10,000-ton behemoth forged in the heat of Alabama's shipyards and now laden to gunnels with 7,000 tons of classified mustard gas shells destined for secret Allied depots in Bari, Italy, Captain Elvin A. Paddock, a weathered 48-year-old veteran of the Great War's merchant runs, grips the scarred teak rail with white-knuckled hands, his eyes, sharp despite the fatigue lines etched around them, scanning the heaving horizon where a sudden, ominous plume of white foam erupts from the depths like a breaching whale, a sleek periscope slicing the surface, its glass eye glinting coldly in the intermittent moonlight filtering through the overcast. From the shadowed bowels of the sea, U-558, a battle-hardened type WWII U-boat commanded by the 32-year-old Captain Lieutenant Gunther Kreck, a stoic Prussian with 12 patrols on his belt, surges silently to periscope depth at 150 meters, her electric motors humming softly as she launches a deadly spread of 4G-78 torpedoes at 2:15 a.m., their compressed air bubbles trailing like vengeful specters in the pale lunar glow, streaking at 30 knots toward the convoy stragglers. Explosions tear through the enveloping night with cataclysmic fury. The British freighter SS Birmingham City, a 5,600-ton workhorse carrying 4,000 tons of bauxite ore, disintegrates in a colossal fireball that illuminates the waves for miles, her 14-man crew vanishing in the inferno and debris. The Norwegian tanker SS Atlantic Sun, burdened with 12,000 barrels of vital aviation fuel, lists perilously to starboard, her ruptured tank spilling a viscous slick of 100-octane gasoline that ignites. In a sprawling, hellish blaze across the water, flames dancing 50 feet high and casting grotesque shadows on the faces of survivors scrambling for rafts. Faint, triumphant cheers echo from a U-boat's narrow conning tower as Kreck, peering through the attack periscope's rubber eye cup, tallies his kills and taps out a terse radio message in enigma-encrypted Morse to Admiral Karl Donitz, Befehlshaber to U-boot BDU, headquarters in occupied Paris. For it's confirmed, heavy tonnage sinking, convoy morale broken. Yet, as the false dawn of May 25th breaks through the ragged overcast, heralding the wolf pack's momentary retreat with the staccato thunder of escorting destroyers, HMS Starling and HMS Wild Goose, their 4.7-inch quick-firing guns barking, and hedgehog mortars hurling 24 spinning projectiles in lethal salvos that straddle the submerging U-boats. The surviving 37 ships of ONS-5 reform their defensive diamond, Commodore's pennant fluttering defiantly from the lead vessel. From the western horizon's edge, piercing the morning mist like heralds of renewal, emerges a fresh phalanx of 50 American cargo vessels, Liberty shipped straight from the assembly ways of U.S. Pacific and Atlantic yards, their tall stacks belching thick black smoke from triple expansion engines as they slide into the convoy stream, flooding the vital sea lanes with towering stacks of wooden crates brimming with canned spam, reinforced steel girders from Mulberry harbors, and 55-gallon drums of high octane aviation fuel. The Germans' vaunted boast of starving the Allies into submission dissolves into the ceaseless, triumphant roar of these engines, transforming the treacherous Atlantic from a graveyard of sunken dreams into an inexhaustible highway of democratic abundance and unyielding resolve. To fathom the monumental stakes and far-reaching ramifications of this churning maelstrom in the North Atlantic during the pivotal spring of 1943, one must navigate backward to the turbulent, unforgiving current of the Battle of the Atlantic, the longest and most grueling continuous campaign of the entire Second World War, enduring from the war's outbreak on September 3, 1939, to the final U-boat surrenders in May 1945, a shadowy undersea odyssey that claimed over 70,000 lives, sank 3,500, Allied merchant ships totaling 14.5 million tons, and destroyed 783 German submarines, ultimately deciding the fate of the European theater by securing or severing the vital maritime arteries that nourished Britain's defiance and the grand Allied counteroffensive. The campaign's grim origins trace to Germany's aggressive U-boat doctrine, first championed by Grand Admiral Erich Johann Albert von Falkenhayn's predecessor Erich Raeder in the 1935 Anglo-German Naval Agreement, but refined into a lethal art by Raeder's successor Karl Donitz, a calculating submariner who had commanded UC-68 in the Great War and envisioned a ruthless tonnage war of unrestricted commerce raiding to economically asphyxiate the British Isles, mirroring the Imperial German Navy's 1917 U-boat offensive that had torpedoed 5.8 million tons of shipping, provoked American intervention, and nearly compelled London's armistice before the armistice of November 1918. By the autumn of 1939, with Poland overrun and the phony war gripping Western Europe, Donitz, promoted to Convoy-Admiral in October, deployed his initial 57 U-boats, primarily Type WWII models, 40 meters long, 5 torpedo tubes, 11 torpedoes, 44 man crews powered by 1,160 horsepower diesels for 8,500-mile surface range. In lone wolf patrols off Scapa Flow and the western approaches, sinking 750,000 tons in the first 4 months, including the British liner RMS Athenia on September 3rd, 112 civilian, dead, including 28 American, marking the war's first U-boat atrocity and prompting Roosevelt's Neutrality Patrol extension. The fall of France in June 1940 unlocked the Biscay ports, Brest, Lorient, Saint-Nazaire, transforming them into fortified U-boat layers under the Atlantic Wall's concrete pens, each sheltering 20 boats, roofed with 3.5 meters of reinforced concrete, from which Donitz wolf packs. Coordinated formations of 8 to 20 submarines radio-linked via shortwave transmitters operating on 30 to 50 megahertz, prowled the convoy routes with devastating efficiency. The October 1940 assault on SC-7 and HX-79 off Ireland claimed 32 ships, 153,000 tons, in 48 hours, 48 under Heinrich Liebe alone accounting for 7. Britain, a seafaring empire utterly dependent on imports for survival, drawing 60 million tons annually of foodstuffs, 70% of calories from overseas wheat and meat, fuel, 8 million tons of oil, and raw materials, iron or from Sweden, rubber from Malaya, teetered perilously on the precipice of collapse. Prime Minister Winston Churchill's war cabinet, meeting in the cabinet war rooms beneath Whitehall, confronted stockpiles dwindling to 10 weeks of aviation fuel and 8 weeks of grain by mid-1941, imposing draconian rationing under Ministry of Food, bacon limited to 4 ounces weekly, sugar to 8 ounces, eggs to 1 per week. While the Board of Trade's dig for victory campaign mobilized 1.4 million allotments to supplement diets, and blackouts plunged coastal cities into darkness to thwart U-boat sightings. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, crippling the U.S. Pacific Fleet and drawing America into global war, intensified both the threat and the salvation. Roosevelt's Lend-Lease Act of March 11, 1941, had already funneled $50 billion in aid, equivalent to $700 billion today, including 50 overage U.S. destroyers via the Destroyers for Bases deal, but the Atlantic's treacherous Black Pit, the mid-ocean void beyond land-based air cover, persisted as a death trap with U-boats, sinking 609 Allied vessels, 3.1 million gross tons. In 1942 alone, a peak of 115 ships, 700,000 tons. In November, including the harrowing pedestal convoy to Malta in August, 13 or 14 merchants lost, but delivering 32,000 tons of oil that sustained the island for 3 months against Rommel's siege. This battle transcended mere naval skirmishes to become the war's foundational linchpin, the unsung prelude to all subsequent Allied triumphs. Without master of the sea lanes, the Soviet Union, receiving 4 million tons of Lend-Lease via the perilous Arctic Murmansk and Persian corridor routes, faced famine amid the Eastern Front's 27 million dead. North Africa's Operation Torch in November 1942 landed 107,000 troops and 430 tanks precariously across a 600-ship armada, shadowed by U-173 off Casablanca, sunk by USS Satterley, and the European theater's build-up for Operation Overlord would falter, stranding 2.5 million men, 500,000 vehicles, and 12 million tons of supplies on British shore. Triumph in the Atlantic unbarred the floodgates of invasion and liberation, forging the pathway from the hedgerows of Normandy to the rubble Berlin, while failure would have isolated Britain, compelling a humiliating armistice and consigning the Grand Alliance to fragmented defeat. The German naval establishment, ensconced in the labyrinthine concrete fastness of Loriot's sprawling U-boat pens on the rugged Biscay coast. Vast, bomb-resistant bunkers engineered by the organization tote with 5-meter thick roofs of granite and steel that withstood 1,000 RAF sorties until the 1944 Tallboy earthquake bombs finally breached them, pinned their strategic aspirations on the U-boat fleet as the great equalizer in a surface navy eviscerated by early disaster, the Norway campaign. Loss of 10 destroyers in April 1940. The Royal Navy's carrier strike at Taranto in November 1940. 3 Italian battleships crippled, inspiring Pearl Harbor, and the pride of the Kriegsmarine battleship Bismarck, hunted and sunk in May 1941 after claiming HMS Hood, 1,415 dead. Donitz, a lean, bespectacled tactician forged in the Kaiser's Imperial Navy and scarred by his own 1918 internment as a U-boat commander, had relentlessly lobbied Adolf Hitler since the 1939 invasion of Poland for a submarine-first strategy, arguing in his seminal October 1940 BDU position paper submitted to the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, OKW, that the U-boat offers the sole means to wage effective war against Britain's sea power, allocate 300 boats, and we sink 700,000 tons monthly, collapsing the enemy's economy within 18 months through starvation and blockade. By January 1943, with production ramped under Albert Speer's armaments ministry, factories in Hamburg and Danzig churning out 20 U-boats monthly despite Allied bombing, Donitz commanded 240 operational submarines, the ubiquitous type WWII, 67 meters long, 1,160-ton displacement, 4 bow and 1 stern torpedo tubes loaded with 14 G7 electric torpedoes for silent underwater attacks, 44-man crews enduring 75-day patrols on 2,000 calories of tinned herring black bread and ersatz coffee brewed from roasted acorns, organized into wolf packs like Group Stortbecker, 20 boats under Captain Lieutenant Heinrich Timm that ambushed convoys using the sunflower tactic, encircling from astern under radio guidance from BDU's plot room in Paris, where Enigma encrypted signals on 10-kilowatt transmitters plotted positions on grease pencil charts. Propaganda amplified the hubris. Joseph Goebbels' Reich Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda flooded the airwaves with Radio Deutschland broadcasts and the weekly newsreel Die Deutsche Wochenschau, screening footage of U-boat crews returning to Brest amid cheering crowds and swastika banners, proclaiming the steel wolves of the Führer's star of the plutocratic empires. Donitz himself, elevated to Gross Admiral in January 1943 after Retter's dismissal, thundered in a February 1943 Sportpalast speech to 15,000 Berliners, "Our U-boats will rend the Allied convoys asunder, their bellies full of war material will feed the fishes, and Britain shall kneel in hunger before the Reich's unyielding will." Expectations permeated the ranks. U-boat crews, clad in leather jackets and peaked caps, hardened by rigorous training in the Baltic's Horten fjords, simulating attacks on dummy convoys with periscope drills and escape tank dives to 200 feet, anticipated a tightening noose, replaying the successes of Operation Paukenschlag drumbeat off the undefended U.S. East Coast in January 1942, where 200 unescorted ships, 1 million tons, fell to U-123 under Reinhard Hartigen, including the tanker SS Coimbra, 11,000 tons, in sight of Long Island. Officers like Corvette and Captain Otto Kretschmer, the silent Otto with 47 ships, 272,000 gross tons sunk. To his credit, before his March 1941 capture by HMS Walker, envisioned a campaign culminating in Britain's capitulation by autumn 1943. Their long-range Type 9 U-boats, 58 meters, 1,120 tons, 18 torpedoes, 13,000-mile range on 2,800 horsepower man diesel, ranging from Brazilian oil routes to the icy Barents Sea, signaling tally-ho in coded bursts to BDU's hydrophone operators listening for propeller cavitation. Underpinning this audacity was a National Socialist ideology of autarky and racial destiny. Germany, as a Herrenvolk master race, would endure and prevail through superior will, technological cunning, and the Führer's infallible command, with U-boat crews indoctrinated via the Kriegsmarine's Guidelines for U-Boat Warfare, 1940 edition, emphasizing absolute obedience, no quarter given, and death before dishonor, mirroring the Wehrmacht's Jinken Code, while propaganda posters in Kiel. Barracks depicted wolf packs as Teutonic knights slaying Anglo-Saxon dragons, fostering a cult of invincibility amid the Reich's own rationing, 1,800 calories daily, synthetic rubber from IG Farben's Buna plants, Reality descended upon the wolf packs like the Atlantic's most ferocious rogue waves, an overwhelming, inexorable countertide with the American cargo ships, those indomitable, mass-produced behemoths of wartime ingenuity, emerged as an unstoppable deluge that submerged a U-boat boasting a vast, surging flood of material and logistical supremacy, turning predators into prey. In the cramped, sweat-soaked conning tower of U-558, 150 feet below the surface off Newfoundland's Grand Banks, Kreck and his 44-man crew, faces illuminated by the red glow of battle lanterns, hands slick on the hydroplane wheels, had anticipated another lucrative call after the night's initial strikes, their T-5 Zonkonig acoustic torpedoes, homing on propeller noise at 24 knots. Prime for the stragglers, the periscope's 1.5x magnification, revealing the convoy's silhouette against the phosphorescent sea like a herd of lumbering prey ripe for the slaughter. Emerging to recharge batteries under the cover of darkness, they expected the familiar thrill of the chase, the diesel engine's throaty rumble at 17 knots, the metallic clang of loading tubes, and the satisfying detonation of G7 air torpedoes, 44 kilograms of hexanite explosive, rending freighter hulls, as in Drumbeat's unchecked feast were U-552 under Eric Top claimed 30 ships, 170,000 tons, off Virginia beaches. Instead, as U-558 surfaced at 3:45 a.m. to transmit her report, a hunter-killer group materialized from the gloom, the second escort group under Commander Frederick John Walker, comprising 4V and W-class destroyers, HMS Starling, Wild Goose, Wren, and Wimbrel, and the sloop HMS Kite, their Aztec sonar, sets pinging relentlessly at 20 kilohertz to echolocate the sub at 1,200 yards, while very long-range VLR, Consolidated Liberator bomber from RAF Coastal Command's 120 Squadron at Reykjavik, Iceland, equipped with 10-hour ASV Mark II radar and Lee light searchlights piercing 2 million candle power, swept in low at 500 feet, dropping 6 250-pound depth charges in a 200-yard pattern that bracketed the U-boat, buckling her pressure hull at 300 feet and flooding the forward torpedo room with 10 tons of seawater, forcing Kreck into a desperate emergency dive that grounded her in 200-foot silt, 41 crewmen perishing in the crush as she was abandoned and scuttled. The Wolf Pack's coordinated assault on ONS-5, Group Donnell's 12 U-boats, vectored by BDU's DF direction finding, fixes on convoy signals, faltered catastrophically by May 25th of the committed force. 3 boats were sunk outright. U-707 by HMS Vedette's Hedgehog spigot mortar, a forward-throwing array of 24 bombs exploding in a 200-yard circle, killing 41. U-468 by a Wellington J. Johnny from 547 Squadron with a 600-pound Mark 11 depth charge. U-706 rammed and depth charged by HMS Starling, 49. Dead. For severely damaged, U-707 limped abreast with shattered conning tower, and the convoy's irreplaceable losses confined to 5 stragglers, 29,000 gross tons total. SS Birmingham City, SS Atlantic Sun, SS Zandstrom, SS Bond, and SS Syros, while the Core 37 vessels, carrying 250,000 tons of grain, steel, and munitions, pressed onward at 7 knots under protective umbrella, reforming their anti-submarine screen with smoke floats and snowflake pyrotechnics to blind periscopes. The emotional chasm between the German submariners' buoyant expectations and the harrowing reality gaped as wide and merciless as the mid-ocean's black depths, a shattering dissonance that inscribed dread and futility into the iron hearts of the Kriegsmarine's silent service. These men, forged in the unyielding discipline of Kiel's torpedo school and the Baltic simulated hunts, where they had reveled in the predatory camaraderie of the wardroom, toasting with schnapps to the Führer's glory and reciting verses from the U-boat song, U-Boot Farer, were Pflugen das Meer, U-boat sailors we plow the sea, had steeled themselves to the exultation of dominant. The periscope's crosshairs framing a freighter silhouette, the electrician's cry of torpedo los, as fish, streaked away, and the distant bloom of fireballs signaling another blow to the enemy's vitals, much like the unescorted American tankers of early 1942, SS Esso Nashville torpedoed off New Jersey, 8,000 tons in a single spread from U-158. What they endured was a relentless, industrialized requiem. Convoys ballooned to 60 to 80 ships in layered defenses, zigzagging erratically at 9 knots under the golden rule. Course alterations every 15 minutes to foil torpedo solutions, screened by 10 to 15 escorts, including the diminutive Flower-class corvettes, 870 tons, armed with a single 4-inch QF gun, 2 20mm Ehrlichons, and depth charge racks hurling 50-pound charges over stern, and the revolutionary escort carriers like HMS Biter, A. Converted Long Island class, 12,000 tons, launching 6 swordfish biplanes with radar-directed lee lights and 500-pound anti-submarine bombs. The contrast pierced the soul. U-boat crews, crammed in 6-foot-high compartments reeking of sweat, diesel, and chlorine from leaking batteries, subsisting on 2,000 sparse calories of weevil-ridden hardtack, tin sausage, and vitamin-deficient margarine during 75-day patrols that left beards matted and skin pallid, had anticipated the hunters' primal rush, the sea yielding to their cunning as in the PQ-17 Arctic Massacre, July 1942. 24 of 35 merchants sunk by U-88 and Luftwaffe Ju-88s, denying Stalin 297 tanks. Instead, they confronted a fortified, self-renewing behemoth, American production surging to 7.5 million tons of shipping monthly by mid-1943, Liberty ships absorbing torpedo strikes with compartmentalized hulls, 17 watertight bulkheads preventing foundering like the SS Stephen Hopkins, which in September 1942 sank U-435 with her lone 4-inch gun off South Africa before succumbing herself, and the airspace above alive with countermeasures. B-24 liberators from the U.S. Navy's patrol bombing. Squadron 103 at Argentia, Newfoundland, flying 1,000-mile patrols with 20mm cannon turrets and sonobuoys dropping acoustic beacons to vector escorts. By the end of Black May, the Wolfpack's ledger read defeat. 41 U-boats consigned to the depths, 28 to air attack, including 11 by VLR aircraft, 13 to surface vessels like Walker's Group, 800 sailors drowning in oil-slicked, freezing waters, average age 24, many trapped in flooding conning towers, against a mere 58 merchant sinkings, 350,000 tons. A devastating reversal from 1942's favorable 1,000 ton per U-boat ratio, exposing the hollowness of their starvation boast as the Allies' imports rebounded from 15 million tons in 1942 to 26 million by 1944. For the Germans, the envisioned triumph of the undersea realm devolved into a nightmare of hunted isolation, the ideological fire of Aryan supremacy, flickering against the cold arithmetic of an enemy's boundless, democratic deluge. Historical records delineate this epical reversal with exhaustive, unyielding precision, interwoven from declassified Admiralty dispatches, BDU operational logs, captured Enigma traffic, and post-war interrogations that fused tonnage statistics with the visceral testimonies of captains, crews, and commodores, painting a tableau of hubris drowned in steel and salt. The British Admiralty's confidential monthly anti-submarine warfare report from May 1943, compiled by the Trade Division at the Naval Intelligence Division in Whitehall and declassified under the 30-year rule in 1973, Admiralty File ADM 199/2-068, meticulously documents Convoy ONS-5's harrowing gauntlet, the 42-ship formation, comprising 20 British, 12 American Liberty ships, e.g., SS John Harvey with her secret cargo, SS William L. Marcy carrying 5,000 tons of Kansas wheat, 6 Norwegian and 4 Greek vessels, departed the assembly port of Lockheed in the Scottish Highlands on May 15th under Commodore J.J.H.P.L., the laborde aboard the rescue ship Zamalek, shadowed from the outset by BDU's Group Donau, 12 U-boats vectored from the Azores air gap via 30 MHz short signals intercepted by Y service at Scarborough. The assault commenced on May 22nd in force 8 gales, 40-knot winds, 15-foot seas, with U-707 Obelt, Gunther Lohgering, torpedoing the straggler SS Zandstrom, 2,600 tons of timber, at 11 p.m., escalating to May 24th. 25 Climax, where Krexu 558 Claim 3, SS Birmingham City at 5,600 tons of ore, SS Atlantic Sun's 12,000-barrel fuel load, igniting a 2-mile slick, and SS Bonds for 1,000 tons of steel girders. But Walker's second escort group countered with 200 depth charges, Mark 7, 300 pounds of Torpex explosives set to 350-foot depth, and Hedgehog salvos, sinking U-707 at 4 a.m. on May 25th, 41 dead, debris including a life raft confirming the kill and damaging 4 others, while a Liberator jarred V from 120 Squadron at Nuts Corner, Northern Ireland, piloted by Flight Lieutenant D.C. Tomlinson, swept in at 2,000 feet, her lee light illuminating U-468, KPTL-KD Brandscheid, for a straddle of 6 250-pound depth charges, buckling the boat and forcing 46 survivors to scuttle. Donitz BDU Krieg Stagebuch War Diary, a 500-page ledger captured intact by British commandos during the May 1945 Flensburg occupation and translated in the 1948 U.S. Navy Department's the German Naval Records Collection, Office of Naval Intelligence Serial Number 472, captures the mounting despair. The May 24th entry laments. ONS-5's escorts impenetrable. Air patrols from Iceland close the gap. Losses unsustainable. Sinkings halved to 50,000 tons weekly, culminating in Donitz's fateful May 24th. Directive at 1800 hours. All wolf packs withdraw to west of 35 degrees west. Refit and retrain. The tonnage battle demands new tactics against this deluge. American Merchant Marine Archives from the War Shipping Administration, housed in the National Archives at College Park, Maryland, Record Group 178, quantify the counteroffensive's flood. From 1941 to 1945, 2,710 Liberty ships were launched under emergency shipbuilding program contracts totaling $13 billion, each a 441-foot, 10,500 gross ton vessel, designed by naval architect George G. Sharp with 17 watertight compartments, a 250-foot cargo hold for 10,000 tons, or 500 troops and 2,500 tons of tanks, and a coal-fired triple expansion engine delivering 2,500 shaft horsepower for 11-knot speed and 20,000-mile range, produced at 18 modular yards with Henry J. Kaiser's Richmond, California, Permanente Metals Corporation No. 2 facility, setting records. One ship every 4.2 days by 1943. The SS Robert E. Peary assembled in 4 days, 15 hours, 26 minutes using 200-ton sectional launches. These vessels ferried 50 million deadweight tons overall, including 11 million to Britain via Lend-Lease for 1,000 Sherman tanks from Detroit's Chrysler plants, 380,000 Willis Jeeps, 13 million tons of foodstuffs like 500 million pounds of Hormel Spam annually, and 2.7 million barrels of 100-octane avgas from Texas refineries, sustaining the UK's 50 million population at 2,800 calories daily versus pre-war 3,000, and enabling the buildup of 2.5 million U.S. troops in England by June 1944. Eyewitness quotes pierce the data's veil. Donitz, reflecting in his 1958 memoir, 10 years and 20 days, based on his Nuremberg testimony, conceded, "We entered the war boasting we would starve Britain into submission, our U-boats the unseen daggers at her throat. Yet the Americans countered with an industrial Armageddon, their cargo ships a torrent of steel and sustenance that mocked our every strike, drowning the wolf in waves of democratic might." On the Allied side, Vice Admiral Sir Max Kennedy Horton, Commander-in-Chief Western Approaches, since November 1941 and architect of the convoy system, wired the Admiralty's First Sea Lord Admiral Sir Andrew Cunningham on June 1, 1943. "Black may have snapped the U-boat spine. Our lanes now brim with the enemy's folly. Convoys flow unhindered, their boasts reduced to echoes in the deep." Post-war analyses, such as the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey's 1946 appendix, The Defeat of the German U-Boat Campaign, drawing from 200 interrogations at the U.S. Navy's Interrogation Center in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, tally the inexorable toll. U-boat losses escalated from 23 in April 1943 to 41 in May. 28 aircraft like the U.S. Navy's PB-4Y, 1 privateers for VP, 84 at Quonset Point, Rhode Island, 13 to escorts such as HMS Starling's 4.7-inch salvos, with 800 German sailors, average crew, 44 men, 70% fatalities, perishing in the oil-choked Atlantic, sinkings plummeting 75% to 34,000 tons monthly, while Allied construction rocketed 140% to 7.5 million tons, ensuring Britain's imports rebounded from a nadir of 15 million tons in 1942 to 26 million in 1944. Stockpiling 1.5 million tons of ammunition alone for the Normandy landing. The Liberty ship, that rugged, rivet-studded colossus recurring as the unyielding emblem of American abundance throughout the Atlantic savage saga, threaded relentlessly through the convoy's perilous furrows like an unbreakable lifeline of steel and purpose, its utilitarian form symbolizing the democracy's prodigious, equitable capacity for production, innovation, and the sustenance of collective freedom against tyranny's grasp. Conceived in the urgent fires of 1940 as a response to Britain's sinking losses, initially the simpler EC-2S, C-1 designed by the U.S. Maritime Commission under Chairman Emery S. Land, the Liberty evolved into a wartime icon under the visionary industrialist Henry J. Kaiser, whose modular welding techniques, replacing riveting for speed, and prefabricated sections. Hulls built in 200-foot segments on land enabled mass output. Over 2,710 vessels by 1945, an average cost of $2 million each, down from $4 million pre-war. Crew by 40 to 50 merchant mariners per ship, average age 28, with 10% women serving as radiomen or cooks under the 1942 Maritime Service Integration, drawn from a nation's vast, diverse tapestry. Longshoremen from Brooklyn's teeming docks, Midwestern farmers from Iowa's grain belts turned able seamen, African-American stewards from New Orleans' Creole quarters, and Japanese-American radio men from California's internment shadows, all united under Executive Order 8,802's Fair Employment Mandate. This was abundance incarnate, democratized and decentralized, not the coerced drudgery of the Reich's commandeered labor in Baltic shipyards like Blohm and Voss in Hamburg, where 1 million forced workers from occupied Poland and Ukraine toiled under Speer's brutal quotas, producing only 1,162 U-boats total amid Allied raids, but a voluntary symphony of free enterprise and government orchestration under the War Production Board's directives, with 265,000 women, Juanita welders in overalls and bandanas, arc welding plates and Kaisers for Oregon and California yards amid the swing shift rhythms of big band radios from San Francisco stations. Labor unions like the International Longshoremen's and Warehousemen's Union bargaining for $1.12 hourly wages via the Congress of Industrial Organization. And designs refined through open congressional hearings of the House Merchant Marine Committee that allocated $13 billion, while auditing ways to ensure every ton served the war effort. Each liberty, christened with a bottle of California champagne and sliding down grease-slicked ways into San Francisco Bay or the Columbia River, such as the SS Jeremiah O'Brien, launched June 19, 1943, in just 42 days, embodied the plenty of society unbound by ideology's chains. Her cavernous holds 9 decks, 543-foot length overall, crammed with the fruits of 1943's $200 billion gross domestic product surge, 500 million pounds of Hormel Spam and pyramid-stacked tins, the best meat in the world. As the label proclaimed, 359,000 Willis MB Jeeps crated from Toledo assembly lines, 2,000 P-51 Mustang fighters disassembled from North American Aviation's Inglewood plant, and 55-gallon drums of 100-octane avgas from Standard Oil's Baytown refinery, sustaining Britain's 50 million civilians on augmented ration, 2,800 calories daily, including 1 pound of bread and imported Canadian bacon, while fueling the RAF's 1,000 bomber raids and the U.S. 8th Air Force's B-17 fleets. As ONS-5 reformed on May 26 with incoming reinforcements, the SS William L. Marcy launched March 1943 at Todd Shipyards, Hoboken, laden with 5,000 tons of hard wheat from Dakota silos, and SS Zebulon B. Vance, Bethlehem Steel, Baltimore, carrying 7,000 tons of structural steel for Spitfire fuselages, the Liberty's deep, resonant whistle blast, powered by a steam horn echoing a mile across the waves, reverberated as the auditory heartbeat of American docks from New York to Portland, where 1 million longshoremen under the port of embarkation loaded 1,000 vessels monthly with 500,000 tons of cargo, transmuting the perilous ocean from a realm of peril and privation into a conduit of inexhaustible, life-affirming plenty that mocked the U-boat's predatory isolation. This surging torrent across the Atlantic's unforgiving expanse wrought a seismic, irrevocable transformation in the German naval psyche and the overarching ideological framework of the Third Reich, eroding the once unassailable confidence in U-boat supremacy and laying bare the inherent fragility of National Socialism's doctrine of autarky, racial hierarchy, and total war, compelling a shift from predatory optimism to a defensive, existential desperation that hastened the regime's collapse. Prior to the crucible of Black May 1943, the Kriegsmarine's operational ethos, enshrined in Donat's comprehensive 1939 Conduct of the War at Sea manual disseminated to all submarine commanders and aligned with Hitler's continental strategy outlined in the 1925 main camps, prioritizing rapid land conquest in Europe while economically throttling maritime powers through blockade, portrayed a U-boat as a quintessential instrument of inevitable asymmetrical victory, a silent service of stealthy predators embodying the Aryan virtues of cunning endurance, technological precision, and unyielding loyalty to the Führer against a purportedly decadent, materialistic democracies. Striking successes had fortified this narrative. The unchecked Operation Paukenschlag along the unguarded U.S. Atlantic seaboard from January to July 1942, where 25 U-boats under Admiral Eugen Lindau sank 397 ships, totaling 2.4 million gross tons, including the iconic tanker SS San Jose off Jacksonville, 7,000 tons in February from U-504. Exploiting America's pre-war complacency with no blackouts or convoys into the April formation of Task Force 24, the devastating Arctic convoy PQ-17 in July 1942, where Donitz Group Icewolf, 8 U-boats, and 200 Luftwaffe Ju-88 bombers from Kirken sank 24 of 35 merchants, 120,000 tons, denying 297 Stuart tanks and 146 Hurricanes to Leningrad's offenders and the Mid-Atlantic Torpedo Alley rampages of 1942, claiming 1,000 ships, 6 million tons, with wolf packs like Group Hecht under Admiral Carl Friedrich Merton encircling HX-229 in March, 16 sinkings, 79,000 tons. These triumphs fueled a cult of invincibility. Returning crews paraded through Brest's rain-slicked streets to the strains of the U-boat anthem Bootsman Vorwärts, amid adoring crowds waving swastika flags and tossing flowers, while propaganda films like U-Boat Victories in the Atlantic, 1942, directed by Leni Riefenstahl's associate Walter Ruttmann, screened in 5,000 Reich theaters, audiences of 10 million, depicting periscopes as Teutonic lances piercing Anglo-Saxon merchant hearts. Donitz's elevation to Gross Admiral on January 30th, 1943, Hitler's birthday gift after the Stalingrad debacle, cemented the boast, with BDU briefings in Paris's Hotel Majestic emphasizing the U-boat remains a Führer's ace. By summer, Allied imports have Britain sues for peace. The Liberty ship's relentless flood and the Allies' tactical ascendancy compelled profound, corrosive disillusionment that fractured this worldview at its core. In the dimly lit war room of BDU headquarters, a requisitioned chateau on Paris's outskirts, walls plastered with Mercator projections marked by red pins for sunk tonnage, Donitz confronted the unraveling on May 24th, 1943, his face ashen under the harsh glare of shaded lamps as radio operators decoded reports of mounting losses. Per the Kriegstagebuch's May 24th entry, he issued the historic withdrawal order at 1800 hours. Cease offensive operations west of 35 degrees west meridian. All packs dispersed to training areas. The tonnage war demands radical adaptation against this American deluge of hulls and escorts. This pivot marked the ideology's first deep fissure, the myth of spiritual and racial superiority over democratic excess. Goebbels' propaganda deriding the U.S. as a mongrel nation of jazz and hot dogs crumbled under the weight of empirical failure. As U-boat crews, once exhilarated by the hunt's adrenaline, the electrician's thrill of fish away, the commander's exultant sinking confirmed, now logged empty patrols and salt-crusted logbook, Eric Top of U-515, with 35 ships, 197,000 tons to his credit, confided in an April 1943 entry, captured post-war the sea. Once our ally betrays us, their convoys multiply unchecked, a steel flood we cannot stem. Our wolves grow lean while the enemy feasts. By mid-1943, with 200 U-boats sidelined for refits, only 120 operational versus 240 peak, the High Command diverted 30% of national steel output, 500,000 tons monthly, from Panzer production to advanced Type XXI Electroboot, 1,600 tons, 18 knots submerged on snorkels, 23 torpedoes. A desperate innovation too late, with only 118 commissioned by WWII amid sabotage and bombing. Goebbels' private diaries, seized in 1945 and published in 1948 as the Goebbels Diaries, entry May 30th, 1943, betray the regime's anguish. Donitz U-boat boasts rings as hollow as a drum. The American factories pour forth ships like a biblical plague, mocking our national resolve and exposing the Führer's strategy to materialistic scorn. For the frontline sailors, enduring the claustrophobic hell of 6-foot bilges where 90% humidity bred rust and fever, chlorine gas from batteries stinging eyes during dives, the transformation bred a creeping, insidious fatalism. Gestapo reports from Lorya bases, declassified in the 1990s Bundesarchiv files, noted a 20% spike in desertions and war neurosis cases by July 1943. With crews whispering of American miracle in smoke-filled canteens, their faith in the racial Volksgemeinschaft, people's community, yielding to the stark realization of Allied equity. Liberty ship mariners rotated after 5 voyages with 30-day leaves and $1,000 bonuses under the Merchant Marine Act. Medevac by hospital ships like USHS Acadia with sulfur drugs from DuPont Labs, while U-boat men face indefinite patrols, 75% perishing in the deep, 28,000 total dead, many trapped in imploding hulls at 600 feet. The deluge reshaped broader perception. Autarky's illusion shattered as Germany's synthetic fuel output from Luna's hydrogenation plants lag at 5 million tons annually versus America's 200 million barrels. The Reich's rigid Führerprinzip hierarchy, Donut's absolute directives, stifling tactical innovations like the 1943 T-5 acoustic torpedo until too late. Contrasted the Allies' adaptive democracy, where Roosevelt's arsenal of democracy, fireside chats of December 1940 rallied 85%. Public support in Gallup polls. Congressional committees like the Truman Committee ferreted $15 billion in waste, and interagency debates refined convoy routing via operational research teams at the Admiralty, e.g., Patrick Blackett's 1942 analysis optimizing escort placements, reducing losses 25%. By 1944, as 785 U-boats littered the seabed, Type WWII, comprising 70%. The campaign's failure fueled the regime's desperate escalations, V-1 buzz bombs and V-2 rockets diverting 20,000 slave laborers from U-boat yards, hastening the ideological collapse that culminated in Hitler's April 1945 bunker ravings and Donut's brief chancellorship amid unconditional surrender. Factual annals from Allied intelligence vaults, Axis naval archives, and merchant logs illuminate this profound ideological fracture with a wealth of irrefutable metrics and resonant voices, layering the cold calculus of commerce warfare with the human pulse of endurance and awakening. The U.S. Navy's Office of Naval Intelligence monthly summary of current naval operations for June 1943, declassified in 1985 under the Nazi War Crimes Disclosure Act, ONI Serial 47, charts the inexorable turnaround with granular precision. Prior to May, U-boats averaged 500,000 gross tons sunk monthly, peaking at 700,000 in November 1942 with 115 ships via 200 boats. Post-Black May, sinkings cratered to 200,000 tons, 2.1 million total for 1943, a 70% decline, with Allied merchant losses stabilizing at 1.2% of the fleet versus 25% for German U-boat, 41 sunk in May alone. E.g. U-468 on May 12th by RAF Wellington J. Johnny from 547 Squadron at Chivener, Devon, with a 600-pound Mark 11 depth charge straddle killing 46. U-706 rammed by HMS Starling on May 23rd. Her hull split by the destroyer's reinforced bow, 49 dead. BDU's operational records, microfilm from the captured Flensburg files and analyzed in the 1950 British Admiralties, the U-boat war, BR-305, tally the human costs. 800 sailors lost in May, crews averaging 44 men, 70% fatalities from implosions or exposure in -2 degrees Celsius waters, many wearing K-Pop live vests that failed an oil slick. With Enigma M4 rotors and code books seized from U-505 on June 4th, 1943, off Cape Blanc, French West Africa, rammed and boarded by USS Pillsbury, D-133, of task. Group 22.3, yielding 60 prisoners, and decrypts cracked at Bletchley Park's Hut 8 by Alan Turing's team, blinding BDU to convoy routes for months. Quotes from the conning tower and convoy bridge cut through the statistics. Captain Lieutenant Heinrich Timmerview, 251, a Black May survivor with 15 ships sunk, debriefed in the 1946 Goslar interrogation, U.S. Navy interrogation number 57. We plunged into the hunt with the Führer's fire in our veins, expecting to reap the harvest of Allied weakness. Instead, their cargo ships rose like a tide we cannot turn, endless, armored, a democratic deluge that choked our wolves and drowned our dreams. Allied Commodore J.J.H.P.L. de Laborde, in his June 1943 report to Ministry of War Transport, archived in the Imperial War Museum, the U-boats came with boats of famine, but America's liberties bore the feast. Our holds brimmed, the enemy's noose slackened into irrelevance. The campaign's cascading yield was staggering. By D-Day on June 6, 1944, 12 million tons of supplies had crossed safely via 7,000 convoy sailings, stockpiling 2 million troops, 500,000 vehicles, and 1.5 million tons of ammunition in southern England. U-boat effectiveness plummeted 90%. From 1,160 sinkings in 1942 to 132 in 1944, with snorkel-equipped Type WWII/41 boats, introduced July 1943, 769 built, achieving only 10% success rates due to RAF Lee Light Mosquitoes hunting from St. Naval, hastening VE Day by denying the Wehrmacht resupply amid the Ruhr's fall. As the Battle of the Atlantic ground onward through 1943's equinoctial gales and 1944's D-Day armadas, encompassing 300 major convoy action, 50,000 air sorties, and 1,000 escort vessel engagement, the Liberty ship's role in the perceptual and ideological shift amplified exponentially, its silhouette a steadfast constant amid the tempest's fury. A vessel not just a transport, but a transformative equity that bound the narrative of democratic resurgence. In the rolling swells of SC-130, October 1943, 67 ships, 3 sunk by you, for 60 but 90% delivered, with a massive HX-300 series feeding the Mediterranean, 1,000 tons of dates, and jeeps for Torch's aftermath. The Liberty's decks, lashed with 500-ton booms swinging cargo from holds, carried the war's sinews. 1943's output included 11 billion individual meals in ration cases from Chicago's quartermaster depots, 2,000 crated P-51D Mustangs for the 8th Air Force's Big Week, February 1944, destroying 75% of Luftwaffe fighters, and 100,000 tons of Bailey Bridge sections from British factories rerouted via U.S. hulls, forged in modular yards like Bethlehem Fairfield in Baltimore, launching 384 ships, employing 47,000, including 10,000 women. The Liberty symbolized abundance as shared empowerment. Diverse crews, 15% African-American by 1944 under Truman's integration push, 5% women signalmen, bunked in equal quarters with $5 daily hazard pay. Contrasting the U-boat stratified hell where Jewish officers were purged by the 1940 Nuremberg laws and crews endured racial purity as HX-237 merged with ONS-5's remnants in June 1943, carrying Spam tins emblazoned packed by freedom's hands. The ship's steady engine thrum, a rhythmic 80 revolutions per minute, echoed the inexhaustible cadence of American ports. New York's Brooklyn Navy Yard loading 200 ships weekly, Norfolk's Hampton Roads dispatching 500,000 troops to Europe, all under the Merchant Marine Act of 1930 SIXS protection that rotated sailors after 18 months with veterans' benefits. This plenty extended beyond hulls. U.S. medical support via 50 hospital ships, e.g., USHS Mercy, evacuating 10,000 wounded monthly, saved 80% of merchant casualties with penicillin from Pfizer's Brooklyn fermenters, while German U-boat medics rationed sulfur powder amid scurvy outbreaks. By war's end, 6,000 Liberty voyages had claimed 733 sinking, 6,000 mariners dead, honor with the Merchant Marine Distinguished Service Medal, yet delivered 90% of Lend-Lease, their role in the transformation emblematic, a floating testament to democracy's adaptive forge, where innovation welded hulls reducing build times 70%. And inclusion outpaced the Reich's fanaticism, turning the sea's ideological battle into a rout of abundance over austerity. In the epilogue of the Atlantic's tempestuous, 6-year chronicle, as the last fading wakes of U-boat conning towers slip eternally beneath the waves, and the Liberty ship's sturdy hulls anchor in harbors of peace, their cargoes unloaded into rebuilding of shattered continent, the flood of American cargo unveils a timeless, resonant verity etched in the salt of endurance and the steel of shared purpose. The Liberty ship, that humble colossus of democracy's boundless forward, where welders' sparks and longshoremen's sweat converge in liberty's grand, inclusive labor, transcends a realm of riveted plates and laden holds. It pierces the shadows of empires constructed on strangulation, racial myth, and the coercion of the human will. Its decks bearing not the burdens of conquest alone, but the nourishing grace of sustenance, innovation, and unbreakable unity. In those endless convoys threading the gray, unforgiving expanse, defying torpedo and tempest to deliver the fruits of free enterprise, we glimpse a profound, enduring truth, freedom's abundance, nurtured by equitable toil, open collaboration, and inexhaustible wellspring of collective resolve, overwhelms the clenched fist of tyranny's grasp, not through the chains of domination or the frenzy of fanaticism, but through the life-giving tide of shared endeavor and moral plenty, ensuring that history's horizons dawn ever brighter on shores reclaimed and replenished by justice's unyielding, abundant current.